Hey guys, so I was actually going to write a post about this. I've been talking about how I've gained insight about a specific trauma in my life and like a destructive pattern basically in my actually romantic relationships. And yeah, I actually felt very called to talk about it instead because it is quite complex and I really wanted, I couldn't, I tried to put it in words, but written down words, but it was quite hard. So I'm gonna try to explain this instead. And it is very personal, it is very vulnerable to talk about, and I will try my best really to explain it. And hopefully you guys can relate because I think that this is a trauma that probably many can like relate to. Um, so yeah. So yeah, what I want to say is, or what I'm gonna talk about is my close, like pretty much my relationships. Or like my late, like I only had 2 relationships in my life, and they've worked pretty similar. Um, but yeah, in this like last relationship, I've really been aware of it. So, what I want to say is basically how it works out for me is that, or because this has been happening on a subconscious level. I have not been aware of it because obviously I would have changed it a long time ago if I was aware of these patterns, of course, and probably all can relate to that. And yeah, so I think my mom came home. Yeah, she did. And so what's been happening for me is the pattern that I want to talk about is that first I have this person in my life, okay? And it's like I have these intimacy issues, basically, because that's like where the trauma is. And why I have intimacy issues is because of this fear of abandonment. So that is the trauma, okay? The trauma is fear of being abandoned, which leads to intimacy issues. Yeah? And jag håller på att spela in en video. Yeah, and that means that when I have a person in my life, especially a romantic partner, because that's where I really go deep and intimate compared to friendships. I think it, like when it comes to friendships, it works out in a different way. So this is specifically for my romantic relationships. And so yeah, what's been going on for me is that I have this person in my life. I get really like passionate and I'm like, wow, okay, I want to get to know this person, and you know, it's all good. I'm very just I'm just very excited. And then I'm like and then like when the person comes closer to me, it's like things get more scary. I think I get scared in a way. And so how the trauma works for me is that I'm starting to look at faults in the person. I'm starting to be like, nah, like in my subconscious mind, It's like I'm looking for faults and problems, so that in order to protect me, because it's all about protecting myself from not getting hurt again, as like from childhood stuff. Uh, so it's like I get scared and I try to protect myself by finding faults and problems, because it can't be too good to be true, like pretty much. And because it can't be too good to be true, it's like I'm, you know, looking for problems in that person and being like, okay, but maybe it is a narcissist. Maybe it is maybe that person is manipulating me in order to get something out of me, you know, and stuff like that. And that's so much my own projections, because I'm scared and because of my inner child being hurt, you know. So yeah, that's like how it starts out after a while, and eventually those faults I find becomes like frustrating for me. So eventually I will like that energy will just take over me, and I will project those things onto the other person. And the person like holds space for me most of the time, like holds space for me, and like always looking for solutions, while I keep looking for faults and problems. The other person is like just wanting to solve everything. So it's not really like, obviously that's like the first red flag, you know, because this person is just trying to solve everything and have like having everything good, and then I'm like the one being just very not not teamwork at all, you know. So yeah, and eventually like my projections is like me testing the person, like I'm doing things sabotaging the relationship as well, because something in me is like, no, I don't deserve love, I don't deserve this. So I'm like sabotaging for myself, as well as I'm trying to test the other person to see, will you abandon me? No, like, you know, no matter what I do, you should stay, right? Like that's kind of what my brain is thinking. Because if you really love me, you will stay and you will accept me and love me. And that's like what my inner child is looking for, someone to unconditionally love me. And so I'm like constantly testing the person, while also building up this attachment for the person, and neediness and clinginess and all of that. And so that like leads to so much work for the other person to do. Like I have these huge expectations on the other, and like of course like the other person probably has trauma as well, because we're attracting each other, right? And now I'm not talking about the other person's traumas, because how to say it, yeah, like now I'm just talking from my own perspective. Like of course the other person also has issues, why it clashes and why things happen the way it does, you know. But like this is at least what I'm attracting because of my trauma. So eventually the other person becomes very frustrated too, because I'm constantly nagging on the person and, you know, not showing gratefulness, and like that leads to the person pushing me away instead, because obviously it's like it gets too much for the other. And that's something that's been hard for me to realize before, because I'm like, oh, but you should like stick up with this, or you know, I don't know, like, but when the person kind of pushed me away, I see more reasons, you know, I kind of see what I've been looking for as I manifest it, because that's simply just a manifestation of my own fears. And so therefore I'm like, oh, now I can see what I've been searching for, and obviously that gives me more intimacy issues, and that gives me even more trust issues as well. And so it's like, at the same time, I'm like, yeah, okay, so this person might not be good for me. Like, I'm thinking that, and I'm trying to run away at the same time, being like, is this really good for me? Could I find love someone else, like love somewhere else, and stuff like that. So I'm like, I keep pushing the person's limits, like trying to see if it's right for me, as the person is kind of pushing me away more and being like, hey, what should I do? Like, I don't know what to do. And I just become even more, like, project even more. And I manifest situations where I can't trust the person, and where the person is like, I don't know, wanting space. The person eventually wants space, because as I am looking for faults and being like pushing away emotionally, I'm being very clingy physically. That's the thing with me. I'm very clingy and needy physically, but emotionally I like push away. I like, yeah, I just shut down. And that is why the other person don't feel seen, because obviously everyone wants to be emotionally seen, right? And so therefore the person like push me away a bit, or like shuts down, I guess. And like trying to like talk to me about it as well. And I'm being like, yeah, but it's because you doing this and this and this, you know. I'm just in my own world being like, oh god. You know. And what else, also when that person is being like less emotionally like, because I feel like, as I'm looking back, I always been pretty much, at least in my at least with the person I'm with now, I guess, and I kind of always been emotionally seen, but I haven't seen it myself because I haven't been emotionally available to myself and stuff like that. So it's like I kind of become even more clingy, because I feel how the person is kind of walking away from me. Because even though my trauma is protecting me from being abandoned, I kind of like don't want to be abandoned again. So I'm like clinging on for my life. And so the next step is like, the next stage is like the person just starts to feel suffocated physically, and you know, that like that leads to me being even more attached, even more clingy, because I'm like, don't leave me. Like, I'm just very like, my child is just so afraid of losing another parent, I guess, because that's what my inner child looks for in a relationship, someone to take care of me and nurture me. And yeah. So obviously that becomes like a bigger problem. And yeah, so the person feels suffocated, and I'm like all the time like, what should I do? Should I do this and that and this and that? So I'm like pushing away, but then clinging on to the person. Like, it goes like that, back and forth. And what else? Then the mind games comes in, because when you have trauma, it's very easy to become manipulative. And for me, having lots of water in my chart, I can become very emotionally manipulated, and that's a shadow side. And obviously I'm working on it every day. And yeah, it's very common, so I don't feel shameful about it, to be honest. And I'm very open about talking about it. I'm very self-aware, and I love to admit my own uh, flaws. That's kind of what I do. And so yeah, like I start to then become very emotionally manipulative. I think I am throughout the whole relationship, back and forth all the time, not being aware of it, because it always happens subconsciously. And so yeah, like the more time goes by, the more aware obviously I get of it. So therefore I'm able to change my approach to things. But yeah, it's like because I'm so afraid of being left out and abandoned, it's like I'm just doing all these mind games so that the person won't leave me. So it's like I'm kind of like doing the opposite. I'm kind of then I start to become physically instead I become physically like I start to push away the person physically instead, and I'm like, I'm done with this, fuck this shit, like I don't want to deal with this anymore. I don't trust you because of this and this. And it's like, I kind of like really bring up everything why I'm so hurt, why and yeah, I don't know, really just gets very self-centered in that way. So, and the person, obviously, because I do meet empathic people, and people pleasers. So obviously the person becomes very hurt by that, and they just want me to feel good about myself, and they want to help me. So, and therefore the person starts to get closer to me again, and then it's like, oh, but do I want this once I get what I want, basically. It's like, oh, but now when I have the person again, now I know that person wants me and wants to take care of me, I kind of become scared again because of it gets so intimate again, and therefore I'm like, oh, the pattern kind of starts over again. And yeah, but from that point where I'm like, I want to really get out of it, that's where my fear of leaving the situation, I'm leaving the comfort zone, that's where it gets the worst. And I'm like, oh shit, do I want this? Is this good for me? Fuck. And then my illusion of the person just disappears, and I start to see things clearly. And I'm like, okay, but it is actually a very good person. The person is actually doing all of this for me. And that's where I see things clearly. And then I can approach the person and really be like, wow, thank you. I love you so much. You are amazing. Thank you for everything that you do. I really appreciate you. And I can really talk about the things and really apologize for my own behaviors. And that's where it gets really intimate in that moment, and it gets all good for in that moment. But then the whole pattern kind of starts over again, but with more insights and more tools. So it always gets better in one aspect, but also worse in another one, because obviously the more we repeat the destructive ones, they kind of get more destructive. So yeah, that's that's what I've been realizing. And yeah, I'm sorry if I sound like the worst person ever. But to be honest, I kind of feel like the worst person ever when I describe myself like this. And obviously it's just more than, as I told you, it's obviously more to the story than just me having my trauma, because there's always two people in every relationship, and there's always two sides, two stories, and you know, we can't judge anything from just one point of view. We always have to see it, the whole picture, you know. So yeah, like that's kind of my way of seeing my own trauma playing itself out, and I'm kind of healing from it. I'm kind of like, I've kind of put myself out from this situation, so I'm able to really reflect on my own traumas and really be there for myself and not being so dependent on the other person. And yeah, it's a journey. It's hard and it's scary because yeah, I always want, like, I don't know, I want someone to be like this. So yeah, it's very, very scary. And yeah, I guess I just want to be open about it because I feel like probably at least one person can relate to this. And if that's you watching, I'm happy to share this, and maybe you can get some downloads about yourself and how you can deal with your own, I don't know, situation. Maybe you know a person that is this way, and you can, like, yeah, I don't know, like, set boundaries for yourself. Because that's been my issue as well, like people setting boundaries for themselves, or like my partner setting boundaries. That's like been hurting me because that's like a fault I've been seeing. I'm like, oh, but you should not be this way, blah blah blah, if you love me, or if blah blah blah. And yeah, but to be honest, it's good to have boundaries, and that's also something I'm learning, to really appreciate the other person for setting boundaries up for themselves and nurturing themselves. And I need to be good at setting up my own boundaries because I don't think I'm good at it at all, and that's why I get so triggered when other people set up boundaries for themselves, or my partners. So yeah, it's a journey, and yeah, I hope all of this makes sense to you. Like, if you want to talk about it more, you can always write to me. And yeah, I really hope that it made sense. And yeah, that's that. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day, night, evening, whatever time it is. And yeah, I'll see you later. Bye.